Welcome, Bronco Nation, to another exciting video. This is going to be a very special time. We're going to get to talk about the Boise State spring camp. The spring game's only about 10 days away right now. It's 25th, so we are coming up on it very, very quickly right now, and we're excited to talk about where Boise State is at, which is a little bit of a temperature test of the program. Talk about what needs to be focused on in spring camp, and then we're going to look at through some film. For those of you who are not familiar, I have Bronco Blueprint on with me today. Bronco Blueprint, a fantastic channel, just started up last year, if I'm right on that. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, last year was our very first year. It's me
Nice.
and a couple past players. We have them on try to every week. Today we'll be bringing on TJ Acree. He's one of the past wide receivers for Boise State. He was kind of right before the Kellen era, and then a lot of times we have Ricky Chongachu on as well. He was a defensive end with Kellen, and it was. I mean, I loved watching those guys. I remember going back when I was really little, watching TJ's highlight films on the DVD and stuff. So I always love bringing those guys in, getting a little bit of their takes too.
This is going to be a great show. You talked about the guys that you're bringing on who are on your channel regularly, but make sure you check out Bronco Blueprint. They do stuff throughout the whole season. They do tape reviews after games. They're doing really fantastic stuff. And again, it's, all three guys out there. So fantastic content. Make sure you check them out. I'm sure there'll be a link to the description. But let's get into this, man. I'm going to let you run things. I ran the intro here. Welcome to the Broncos Studios. Welcome to the Horseshoe Spirit Studios here. Make sure, again, that you check out Horseshoe Spirits, a great way to be able to support Boise State while getting yourself a alcohol that tastes great as well as looking great on your shelf as well. If you are 21 or older, you can find this anywhere in Boise. Any of the liquor stores in Boise, you should be able to find this. If not, ask for it by name. And then also 21 or older, you can get it online as well. They have a website, which will be linked in my description. And if you guys are willing, I'll send a link to you guys as well to put in the description of your video.
Yeah.
Make sure you check it out. A fantastic way to support Boise State NIL and at the same time get yourself something collectible that will taste great and look great on your shelf. All right, let's get into talking about this thing, man. Again, I'm going to let you take it away. I'm excited. Let's talk about this Boise State spring camp and what we're looking forward to for Boise State, what they need to work on, some of the things we want to see, and some of the things we have seen as far as filling some of those key position groups coming into this year. Go ahead, man. Take off.
Man, well, first of all, I'm hoping that I'll be drinking some of those horseshoe spirits to celebrate this year and not to mourn, you know. But yeah, I'm really excited for this year, man. We have so much changing, and I've been kind of geeking out all winter, you know, keeping up with all of the recruits and everything, and it's been a lot of fun this year. And I think there's a couple things that I'm really excited for, and a couple things that make me a little bit nervous. So I'm kind of excited to dial into all that. But first, I want to talk about last year and kind of what things we felt like didn't go so well. Where do we need to improve going into this year? And what things do we need to continue, you know? I think, you know, there was a lot of talk on the Maddox Madsen thing. When he got hurt, you know, Cutforth didn't start out very good, but he came back and started actually improving pretty quickly. And so I think going into this year, it does sound like Maddox, of course, is probably going to be the starter. And we have some really good recruits that are coming in. We actually just did a video like a week or two ago, dialing in all of the new recruits, talking about their footage from high school and what they can bring to the team. I don't think they'll be ready this year, but you never know. And I am curious, like, if Maddox goes down, who's going to be the secondary? You know, is it going to be Cutforth? Is he going to be able to retain that position? Or is someone like Cash Herrera or Jackson Taylor, who I'm really big on, going to be able to step up and elevate their game so that they're ready? So that's something that I'm going to be watching very closely, just kind of throughout the year. But there's a lot of other things. I think one of the things that scares me the most is the offensive line. You know, we lost Cage Casey, a key part of the offensive line, but we also lost our two centers, both the starter and the backup. And so we kind of have two really big gaps there, experienced players that were really holding down the line. And around them, we had some new guys last year that were struggling a little bit. Like Matoyer had a lot of fouls, and you know we had some new guys that were figuring it out. So I'm curious to see if they can step up this year, and who's going to come in to replace those expert guys. But where do you see that we need to improve, and where can we continue to be strong?
Well, I'm definitely with you there on the quarterback concerns, the offensive line. Max Matson has got to be the most controversial quarterback that Boise State has ever had. I mean, you always had fans that were critical of quarterbacks at Boise State. Joe Southwick wasn't universally loved, and even Brett Rippon. Looking back, it's insane to see how disappointed people were in Brett Rippon's performance when statistically you look back, especially after what came afterwards as far as consistency, and you say, man, he was one of the greats for Boise State. So yes, I understand the Maddox Matson situation. I am definitely one of those guys that's right there in the middle camp. You've got the guys that are the Maddox Matson haters, and then you have the guys that are the Maddox Matson fanboys, and I've been called both. So I would definitely say that I'm right there in that middle ground. I'm right there with you where I think Maddox Matson deserves to have a chance to be the starter this year. My concern, my issue with the Maddox Matson situation is that he's being handed, or it appears that he is simply being handed the starting position. Last year, how Boise State approached 2025, 2024, Max Matson did enough to say that he should be the leader in a competition, but he certainly didn't do anything in that year where you said he is the guy who can go out and win as a game by himself. That was the Ashton Jeanty season. And the fact that Boise State went into 2025 without even trying to stir up any form of competition, to the point that Boise State has quarterbacks leaving. And yes, obviously, not playing that great there with Malachi Nelson, but still, the fact that Boise State had quarterbacks leaving, that there wasn't a competition where recruits didn't even want to come in, they knew that Max Matson his position was something that could not be challenged. And it feels like we're going into that this year. Now, it's a little bit of a different room because Max Matson's in his last year. So whether recruits feel like they can compete this year or not, it doesn't matter because they know they're going to get a chance to build themselves up to be the starter for 2027 and afterwards. But I am disappointed in the conversation postseason during the bowl game wrap-ups and then coming into spring camp when it comes to the quarterback room, because while I am not a Max Matson hater, I don't think like he should be cut and he doesn't have a chance and we can't win with him. I'm not on that camp at all. And I think that Max Matson can win for us. My biggest concern is that he doesn't deserve to be unchallenged. He doesn't deserve to have the longest leash of any quarterback in Boise State history. This guy's not Kellen Moore. He's a good quarterback who just because of injury or because of the system or whatever hasn't had a chance to prove himself. And that's the biggest problem. He hasn't had a chance to prove himself. So he hasn't proven himself. So why has he been given this unlimited reign to basically go out and do whatever he can without being given a chance to fight for that battle? I think Max Manson's better when there's somebody on his heels breathing down his neck. And I think Boise State has the opportunity right now with those highly recruited recruits. And even with Max Cutforth coming back after what he showed on the back end of the season, to actually put in a real competition, not just for the present, but also for the future, even if those other guys don't end up winning the job, even if it does end up being Max Matson, if he's able to earn it, which I think he's capable of, even if they don't end up beating him out, that iron sharpening iron will build big things for 2027 and already put them in a position where they were already starting to think like starters coming into the all-important next year in 2027 afterwards when we have a new look offense. So I am very concerned about the quarterback position, in that I don't feel like it's being treated with the attention to perfection that past Boise State quarterbacks have been forced to be in. And so it is a battle for second place. I'm very interested to see who ends up in that out of camp. When you talk about the offensive line, I have some similar concerns there. Obviously, a unit that was heavily hit by graduation. It is, though, one that I'm not as concerned about in general because I think that two things will be better. First off, I think the offensive play calling is going to be significantly better, whether it's Nate Potter still handling the reins or if what seemed to happen last year where Zach Hill gets a little bit of a heavier hand in the process. Either way, it's a more experienced Nate Potter and potentially a more involved Zach Hill. I think the biggest problems with the offensive line we saw last year were due to the offensive play calling, and I think a more creative flowing process this year, a more confident play caller will help ease some of that tension in an offensive line that does lose some experienced starters, but hopefully won't be having to be as dominant up front on their own sake, and hopefully have a little bit more of an offensive scheme behind them that just confuses the defenses more versus defenses being able to hone in on exactly what Boise State is doing, which is what I think showed the most weaknesses for Boise State last year in that unit. The other factor is that I think Boise State is going to have a much more dominant run game with a fully healthy Sire Gaines coming back, and the combination of them and Dylan Riley. We saw what Boise offensive lines were able to do when they had super strong running backs like Ashton Jeanty and even George Halani. I think now that you have a more confident, more established, healthy duo there between Sire Gaines and Dylan Riley, it will help compensate for any growing pains out there on the offensive line. And I also think we have some potential. I'm going to throw out my two. I know I've talked for a little bit here, but my two positions that I'm the most concerned and excited about for Boise State is going to be number one, wide receiver. I think this is a room that we just have no idea what's going to happen. We'll talk about some of the guys that left. I'm not going to get too deep in that right now, but loses their top four receivers if you count the tight end position as well. Top four receivers on the roster gone for Boise State. I will throw out a stat right now. Between the four guys that they lost 1,915 yards receiving out of 2,507 yards for the year for the program. I mean, that is incredible. Not incredible. That's devastating to lose that amount of production. And now you're coming into 2026 with a quarterback room that, yes, we don't know what's going to come out of that. And we don't have that proven number one wide receiver. So there's a lot of potential there. So that'd be my number one area that we have a lot of guys that we're excited about. We can talk about here in a minute. But how much are they going to be able to grow and step into starting positions as key playmakers in year one for a lot of these guys, or year two coming back from a shaky season with multiple quarterbacks at the helm? And then my second biggest unit of concern is that linebacker position for Boise State. Because I think that last year we didn't really see a lot of explosion or strength there. I think when you look at the defense overall, defensive line was the biggest concern. I actually wasn't that concerned by how they played. And the secondary really stepped up. Yes, we have a lot of questions there, which we'll talk about later on. But overall, the secondary and defensive line played really, really well. The linebacker position, I think, was Boise State's biggest weakness. That's where you started to see guys breaking through. That's where you saw a lot of those completions short and mid with the linebackers not being able to step up in coverage. And so how does Boise State step up in a position that they didn't really attack aggressively in recruiting over the offseason? I mean, they went out and grabbed a guy from KU, and they have some exciting guys coming in from the high school level, but they didn't go out and grab a bunch of experienced guys like they did in the secondary room. And so now we're asking players who showed promise last year, Jake Ripp, Bowen Phelps, those type of guys to step up, but they're not going to just need to step up. They're not going to need to double the production we saw last year just to have confidence in that room. So while other positions have new blood coming in, which starts to bring some excitement about potential for the linebacker room, we have to see guys step into something they have had an opportunity to, but haven't done so far. And you just start to question how much are they capable of actually filling that role. So for me, the linebacker and the growth we see between spring and fall camp is going to show us a lot for the long-term potential of this defense. So those would be my two, but I definitely agree on your first two as well.
Yeah, I think for linebackers, I mean, I totally agree. I think it was a little bit lacking last year, not a lot, but now we've lost Notriani, who was kind of holding it down, you know? So without him, we're basically falling back on, like you said, Bowen Phelps and on Jake Ripp. And Jake Ripp last year was a little bit of a letdown compared to, like, they were talking all about him in camp, saying how great he was looking. And then he kind of was just there during the year. There weren't a ton of moments where I was like, man, this kid is just shredding the field, you know?
Right.
Bowen Phelps is a different story. He came in, started out slow, didn't really get many chances really, but then when he did, he was showing out, and he made some big plays. He was in the right spots, and I think this year he's going to put on a little bit of weight, and he's going to come in, you know, knowing the job now. And I think Bowen Phelps, he's the guy that I kind of expect to be the standout this year. I think he's going to be the replacement for the Notriani type. I mean, he's not as big as him. He's not going to be the same type, but he's going to be that leader. And I think the guy from Kansas, you know, he looks good. I watched some of his film, and I think we're actually going to be doing a future video on the linebackers and also the new running backs that came in. But he did look pretty good. And, you know, I think he needs to grow. He didn't wow me necessarily, but he's got room to be that guy. And I think he's just a good depth piece overall. But this year, I mean, like I said, Bowen Phelps, I kind of expect to step up. But Jake Ripp needs to step up, you know. He needs to become that second guy that they can just depend on. If we have those two people, you know, at least we've got kind of a little bit more of a core that we can lean on. So, yeah, I totally agree on that. I think that's going to be a big spot to look this year. Coming out of camp, going into the spring game, like, what's that looking like? Who's the guys playing and how are they performing? But yeah, I totally agree. And then as far as the wide receivers, you know, I'm really excited about the wide receivers as well. I think the wide receiver room is, throughout the whole winter, that's been the one room that I have been the most just amped up about. And not just because of the players that we brought in, not just because of the players we lost, you know, you talk about all of the production yards we lost, but also what percentage of drops did we lose? There were like Chris Marshall and some of those guys, man, were just dropping stuff where it's like, what are you doing? And, you know, some of these guys they brought in, we're going to see that here in 1 second. they seem to have hands, you know. And I mean, coming into college, Chris Marshall did too, but he didn't do anything the whole time he was in college, really. And these guys, I mean, they've been playing at lower levels, you know, JV and stuff like that, but they performed. They did very well. And so I'm excited to look at some of their footage and see what you think. But I tried to get some clips that showed the stuff we didn't see with the other guys and the things that make me excited about them. And then, you know, aside from that, we have the new coach, which I am just amped about. Like, don't get me wrong, the last wide receiver coach did fine, you know, past Boise player, you know, you can't harp on him too much, but the room was just a little lackluster. And I think the drops thing was killing me last year, and not just last year, I mean the last few years it's been a little lackluster. And we really, you know, we need a Khalil Shakir type to come back. We need a guy that can just be the standout that we can rely on, and we just haven't had it. And so I think there's a couple guys this year that either could step up this year and become a guy like that for us, or could in the future. And I mean, right now, all the talk in camp is Rashawn Jones. You know, he's out there every day making big plays. He's outlifting the upperclassmen. I've even heard he's outlifting the linemen, which is saying something. And especially as like a 17-year-old wide receiver, you know. So he's got the heft, he's got the muscle. He's kind of that big body wide receiver that we like. But he's fast too. I got some footage of him that we'll take a look at. And man, he can jump all over the field at times. And he's got the weight carrying it to push through people when he does run into them. So really excited for that. We have Terrius Favors, you know, #1 recruit basically out of Georgia. He was both cornerback and wide receiver. He was just killing it. And really, I mean, he could play both ways if we really wanted him to. He's that good on both sides. I know he's going to be focused more on wide receiver, but you know, the special teams coach is talking about bringing him in as a kickoff returner and having him do a lot of time on kickoff and punt returns, which looking at his film, I could see that. He was that guy where in high school, he was the gadget guy. You know, he actually played at quarterback a lot. They put him in at quarterback, who'd take the snap and just run with it. They were just like, give him the ball and we'll score, you know? And so we'll see some of that too. But yeah, I'm really excited for this room. I think the coach that came in, both of them, you know, the DB coach, I'm really excited for. I love his passion. And he seems like a smart guy. He seems like he's got a good plan for the room to elevate them. But the wide receiver coach, as soon as I heard that announcement, I was very impressed because he has the heritage, if you will, you know. He's worked with some really big guys. I think it was Gallup was one of the guys that I was like, dang, dude, that guy's good, you know. And I think he worked, if I remember right, I think he worked with Gallup at Colorado State when he was still in college and stuff. So he was helping to develop him, and he's became, you know, one of the better receivers in the NFL. And we have a guy who has experience developing high-level talent. And I just like his style. I like his mentality. And he played, you know, he's got the experience on the field too. He's not just a coach. So I think that brings some respect too from the room. I think when they see like, you've done it, you've worked with a lot of guys who've done it, I want to do it, you know? And so they kind of respect him a little bit for that and listen to him a little bit more. Let me say it this way. I'm excited to see the difference. You know, going from the Miller to this guy, like what does it look like? What changes are we seeing? What does, you know, he elevate that Miller couldn't? I'm just really excited to see that difference. And with some of these guys, with all the talent that they're bringing in, man, there's just so much potential in that room. So I am just psyched about that.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to what you were saying about it being different a little bit with these
Yeah.
guys coming in, doing what can they pull out different than Miller and some of the other coaches did. And I like what Boise State did in this. I do like when they go within the tree and bring in guys that understand the Boise State culture, right? But what I like with these guys is that I think these are two kind of position groups. Corners, I think I've seen some pretty good. I mean, everybody I know harped on the cornerback coach, but I really think he showed out in the last 2 years of his position there, really kind of bringing these guys together. But the wide receiver room has been on the steady plateau / decline since Khalil Shakir left. And I think that is one of those absolute positions that you needed to bring in a fresh perspective and some new blood. And I think they've done that here. And I love what I hear out of when he talks his interviews and you say, what's his, they're interviewing and asking, what is your number one focus? He's talking about speed and explosive playmaking. That's what he's focused on. And you look at these guys, I think you see that because those are the two areas that Boise State has been the most lacking, really. Have they been able to take the ball, take the top off of a defense? Those deep routes haven't really worked. Now, whether that's Madsen or the wide receivers, who knows? But when you do watch the tape, they are lacking in separation, and the coaches call that out as well. And that's a speed focus. And then it's winning those one-on-ones, those explosive plays. There hasn't really been, besides a couple of moments, Chris Marshall kind of catching the ball against the helmet, or Quentin Brown diving in the end zone and breaking his nose. They really haven't been those you talk about, Ricky Chongachu days, Kellen Moore days, those Titus Young type plays, those
Yeah.
Austin Pettis type plays. There haven't been those type of moments at Boise State in the last, 3 or so years, aside from a couple here and there. But that used to be almost every game there was a moment like that. And it feels like Boise State is bringing in playmakers who are going to be able to do that. Yes, we lose some big guys in the wide receiver room. Latrell Caples, 600 plus yard receiver. It wasn't necessarily a huge every play type of threat, but he brought a lot of leadership to that room that will certainly be missed. Same with Chase Penry. And Chase Penry was one of those like blue collar to his soul type players that brought a lot of grit to that room. And then you talk about Chris Marshall, yes, he had a lot of drops, but I think that he also was one of those guys that I wish had stayed because I think that he could have been developed into. I thought we started to see flashes of that. And then obviously the loss of Matt Lauder. I think he right there is going to be probably one of the most underutilized. When we look back on Boise State program history, one of the most wasted talents for us just because of the offensive play calling. He had so much more to give. I think he's going to have a long career in the NFL, and we just did not use him to his full potential.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you do have a lot of exciting guys coming in that room. You talked about some of them already. I mean, Terry's Favors, he was a great guy to interview. Asked him kind of what players out there within the NFL, recent college football space that he admires or sees himself as similar to, and he said Travis Hunter because he likes that both ways. And maybe he'll get an opportunity. We don't know, but he is that kind of raw athlete, kind of what we saw at Sire Gaines when he first came in, a
Mhm.
guy that you're just like, he's just someone who could explode on the field in day one. And then some of these other guys coming back, I see a lot of excitement and potential in them. I love when you're talking about the weight room monster there, a kid out of Idaho. You love to see that. It reminds you a little bit of Shane Williams Rhodes when you outlifting D linemen and that kind of thing. But also, we got some guys returning that I think are going to be exciting. Quentin Brown, I think, in any other year for Boise State would probably be one of those guys that was a standout wide receiver. Any other normal offense for Boise State, he's one of those guys that puts up, 400, 500 plus yards as a freshman. He had that kind of potential. I think we didn't use it, but maybe we will this year. And then you look at guys like Ben Ford, who had who was having a Sean Monster-esque season last year. One of those guys that doesn't really do anything until that last year and then just explodes onto the scene. And he and Madsen had a really tight connection. So if it is Madsen coming back, I do expect that you are going to see Ben Ford stepping up. But as the season progresses, I think you're going to see some of those other guys, some of those newer faces coming in, which we haven't even talked about all of them. Cameron Jones, a really exciting wide receiver who had a lot of potential, a lot of offers from Power 4 schools, almost transferred out after the season, ended up coming back and staying. I think he's a guy that has some potential to step up. And then Cam Bates is one of those guys that he just had a little bit of a Marshall-esque season, a lot of drops, but has some of that. I'm not going to say he's Titus Young, but he can kind of fit into the multiple roles like Titus Young did. Throw him in the backfield. He can run it for you. He's super agile and fast. And if he can just start to drop less balls, then I think he's going to be one of those big playmakers. So I am really, really excited about this room. But a lot of that not just comes from the playmakers, but it comes to the coach and the mindset, which I think we're bringing a little bit more of that attack mentality back to the wide receiver room, which just didn't seem to be at that same level, at least with Matt Miller. And I love Matt Miller as a player for Boise State. I hope he has lots of success going coaching under Kirby at Washington State. I'm excited to see what his future looks like, but there just didn't seem to be that same energy, that prove it, that chip on the shoulder mentality. And I think with some of these guys coming in and the new coach, we can have that again in this wide receiver room.
Yeah, I think Ben Ford, man, I believe he's gonna have a great year. He was, like you were saying, having such a good year last year before the injury. That was just like, oh man, it sickened me. It just hurt my heart to see that because I think he's a guy that deserves it. He's been working hard his whole career. He's kind of just been a guy in the shadows because he's going through injuries and stuff. But man, he was finally doing it, and I think this year is going to be his year. He's definitely going to be the leader in that room. Like his mentality, his drive, just like that, everything he brings is the Bronco way. And I think, yeah, he's going to be a guy. Talking about Louder leaving, we've got Wagner coming in to back him up. Like, I'm going to miss Louder, but at the same time, I think Wagner can step up into that role towards that, last year, he was almost performing at the same level as Louder. I felt like especially that, like, right at the end there, he had a couple plays where he was just driving to the end zone, breaking through people. Like, he's got the talent, and I think he's going to elevate even another step this year. All right, so we're talking about wide receivers so much. Let's jump into some film. I brought on TJ Acree here. We have him on audio. So TJ, we're going to look at some of the new wide receivers, both that we've brought in from transfers like JV and FCS, and also some freshmen. And we just kind of want to discuss what we're seeing and get a little bit of your take as well. All right, so this first one here is one of the guys that I think the most excited about when he first was announced. I didn't know anything about him, but I looked him up and I found this shot here, and this is the one that I like to spread around on the forums when people are talking about him, saying, "Oh, I don't know who this kid is," so I show him this. So this is Darren Morris. He played for Southern. And he's just got this insane around the defender's back, one-handed catch.
Wow.
Hey, you see his eyes?
Yeah, following the ball the whole time, right?
Yeah.
That reminds me of that Matt Miller reception versus Wyoming in 2011, where he's like laying on his back basically and still makes the catch.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was fun to watch.
Wow.
Yeah, and so when I saw this, I was like, this kid obviously has some hands. And it's funny because Southern in general, they had a lot of running plays, a whole lot of running plays. So I was having trouble really finding a ton of footage of him. And this was one that it all of a sudden just came out of nowhere. And I was like, holy cow. So I had to clip this one. But yeah, Darren Morris, I'm really excited about him. I think he has some potential. He's getting a little bit of talk around camp. So one that, like I said, I love spreading that one around to all the other fans. Now, this next guy here, this is Akeem Wright. So this is Akeem Wright. Akeem Wright is, he's got the hands as well, as we're about to see with this one-handed catch also. What a reach. The thing that I like about Akeem Wright is not only does he have the hands, but oh man, good stuff. As we see here in a second, he is one of those wide receivers that can really make plays after the catch too. And because he kind of excels with that, I wanted to show these clips first and show he's got hands, man. He can catch the ball, The word around camp right now is he's a little bit of a smaller receiver. He's one of the smaller receivers on the team. And I think that's kind of causing him to struggle a little bit. So I'm hoping he puts on a little bit more weight, but he's definitely, he like that. Like we need a guy that can go up and make those jumping 50-50 catches. It's something we haven't had much. And here we're getting into the after the catch plays. So some really good.
I like his homie coming down and blocking for him a little bit.
Yeah, and he's good at following those blocks too.
His some of his moves after the ball and his kind of size disposition is giving me a little bit of Khalil Shakir vibes a little bit here and there.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's a guy that had, I think his last year in JUCO, he had 1,100 yards plus receiving and 12 touchdowns.
And then check this out. I had to slow it down because the camera's a little shaky, but he's definitely got the athleticism.
Wow.
So he's a guy that, I'm really excited about. Like I said, I think in spring camp, he's not making as much of an impact as I would expect with this kind of footage. At least from what I've heard, it seems like people aren't talking about him quite as much as some of the other guys, but he obviously has the talent. And I think he could be one of those guys that throughout the year, as he kind of builds that relationship with the quarterback, he could find his lane and really start to stand out. I think he's one of the guys that only has 1 year left, but I could be wrong on that. So, but he's definitely someone to watch out for. I love stuff like this. I mean, he's weaving through like 6 guys right there and still scores. So
I know he was a junior. I know he was a junior last year, and I'm not sure because they had the whole ruling where the JUCO year doesn't count, so he can maybe he has some more eligibility from there. I'm not sure, but I
Hmm.
do like both of these guys. I think that Morris coming from an offense that just he didn't have the opportunity to explode. He only had 434 yards his last year, but you've seen what he can do in the clips that you showed there, and then just having that college experience, no matter what level it is, whether it's JUCO or FCS, having that experience trying to learn a collegiate playbook and then play with guys. There's talent all over the board. Obviously there's this spectrum of that, but having that experience I think is super valuable and does put them a step ahead of some of these high school guys. So
Yeah.
we've had really huge success with those JUCO, junior, FCS guys like Cedric Wilson and Hightower. So I am excited about them, especially in a room that has so much opportunity right now just because of how much we lost.
Yeah,
Mm.
I agree. And I think you're right. I mean, I think TJ can probably speak to this a little bit more, but when you're transferring from like a high school to college level, what kinds of things are, bring you the trouble and slow you down from making that transition?
Yeah, I think he hit it on the head when he was talking about the playbook, you know? I mean, it's just at every level you have to be able to be more complex and comprehensive and understand, it's like you can't just run by everybody, up until a certain point you can, and you always feel like you can, but it takes a lot more when the defenses also get that speed and even more. I mean, defense is all about cohesion and communication, and so for me, I always such an offensive-minded guy. I didn't really even respect or understand, the power of complete defense. But
Mm,
and I think that I was kind of spoiled even in college with Cutter and Peterson, Hawkins. I mean, Justin was there. He was on the defensive side, but he had a lot to put in as far as the offensive play calls.
mm,
Um, when we were there, and so we did just put up a lot of points and didn't struggle too much with being stopped. But I gained a healthy respect for both, the power of a comprehensive defense and one that's well communicating, and of an offense like that, because a lot of times it's like the offense just kind of has the talent and the element of surprise. But I mean, I think we can all attest to, you know, players can kind of take over a game or anything like that. But really, if you have a team offense who everybody's doing their job and like just holding themselves accountable to and holding each other accountable, it's a thing of beauty. And I mean, no defense can really stop that. And I think that I mean, I'm getting off on a little bit of a tangent, but it seems like defenses have gotten a little more disciplined, so they've been like allowing less points. But I think that also um, offensive cohesion has been maybe overlooked a little bit or not given quite enough um, attention, and so that may have a little bit to do with it too.
Mm.
But yeah, what I like about this guy, Wright, he looks like he's got some grit. He looks like he's brave, so I like to see stuff like that, and he definitely wants to make things happen. You know what I'm saying? He's not trying to go down.
TJ, for you, obviously 2003 is kind of when you really stepped up there, 700 plus yards, and then 2004 was your, leading all wide receivers with 900 plus yards receiving that year. For you, when was it that you talk about that transition coming from high school to the collegiate level? When was it that things kind of clicked? The game slowed down for you a little bit, and you didn't feel like you were thinking as much about just going out there and making the basic plays. And what was it that you did to get yourself to that position?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I think quality reps became much more important to me. Not just reps, but quality reps, especially when it came to holistically knowing what a play was about.
Mm,
Um, and so I think, my sophomore year, so I got hurt and had to sit a half a year out my sophomore year, but I was feeling pretty confident. Um, being on the field.
mm,
At that point, I was making plays on special teams and blocking, but not a lot of passes.
right.
and and so I think that actually going through that part too, and being frustrated by it, like anything
Mm,
else, but that part of like going in and really doing the best that I could on blocking plays. And
mm,
I'm not gonna lie, it takes a toll when you feel like you've been doing it for too long and you just want the ball, and so you can get kind of an attitude about it. But I do feel like the coaches and teammates, helps me stay focused on like, hey man, if blocking is what you're to do right now, then
Mm,
do it the best.
mm.
And then when you do get a chance to get the ball, then do it the best with that too. So, I was feeling, I mean, I'll say this, Coach Pete's voice is like tattooed on my brain from all of the missteps that I had, like TJ, because he's pretty animated in practice, but I do think
Yeah.
he has a lot of respect for, when guys do get it right, and he rewards that with play calls and stuff like that. So, yeah, so much just love and respect for that mentorship and the coaches that were there and the teammates that were there at that time.
Mm.
What you guys did during that formational period when you were establishing that winning culture at Boise State was to build that platform and to build those subroutines, that mentality that was then built on and
Yeah,
used for those other championship teams. And so, yeah, I love
right.
hearing the old stories and getting to kind of see where Boise State came from in that sense as well.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, for me, Bart Hendricks comes to mind, Ryan Dinwiddie
Mm.
comes to mind, and just,
Yeah,
like, get after it guys, and
yeah,
good accountability guys, and would hold themselves accountable, but then you as well with force.
yeah.
So
But it's
it's
funny you
good.
said that story about Coach Pete getting after you because Dinwiddie said something similar about how he'd come into film room and he'd be like, "Yeah, I had a pretty good game," and then it would just be 2 hours of Coach Pete just ripping him over like these four mistakes that he'd made. And he's like, "Come
Yeah,
on, man!" Like, but that was like that mentality, right? Like, hey, yeah, we're gonna go out and we're gonna win, but also we're gonna do it the right way. That
yeah.
mentality of going out and the perfection. It's good to hear they also started to kind of blend a little bit more of the fun as well. But that's what I really admire about those other years, Boise State, is they really focus not just on winning, but on winning the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. One thing that I do want to put on record is I really think that it would have been a lot of fun to play with Kellen Moore. You know what I mean? Just I watched him, so I didn't. It wasn't the same perspective, but the purpose with which he moved, and you know what I
Mm,
mean, the timing that he had. I
mhm.
yeah, I think that would have also been a lot of fun.
So I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. This is Rashawn Jones, and Idaho
Just the Idaho
kid.
kid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
supposedly every single day he's making big plays, and like I said earlier, he's been out lifting a lot of the upperclassmen and stuff. And
Nice.
every
I
single
love to hear
interview
that.
I have heard, they've been talking about him. And I love those catches that are just hard to make, and they're coming down with them. I think, like I said, that's something we need in
Mhm.
the receiver room right now.
Especially where he knows he's gonna get hit. I mean, that second play where he
Yeah,
gets laid out in a clothesline, and luckily the linebacker only took out his leg.
Yeah,
yeah.
and you can see
No,
like,
it's true though. Another guy who doesn't look afraid to make plays,
hmm
and he's going hard. It's like I think that a surge of that is what is really needed in football right now. So I'm happy with what I'm seeing.
yeah, he's definitely quick too. They had a lot of footage of him doing like kickoff returns and stuff like that. And I tried to get more of the receiver clips since he's playing receiver for us, but he definitely like this one here. You can really see how he can move after the catch.
Mm.
So kind of like the Akeem Wright, he's got the potential to do some stuff like that. This one I like. He sees him and just makes a quick little move to get the dodge, which is cool.
He's gonna be one of our taller guys too, because he's sitting at 6'2" and he's almost 200 pounds. So I mean, we have a lot of speed right now, but Cameron Bates, Quentin Brown, those guys are in the 5'9" ish territory. So yeah, big
Yeah.
play wide receiver. It's good to see.
Yeah, we kind of need that physical wide receiver, and I think he can definitely come in and fill the role. And I think maybe that's one reason why he's standing out so much in camp right now is because most of the other
Mm,
guys are short, kind of speedy guys, and he's kind of that
mhm.
big-bodied, physical guy, and so I think he's different. Um, Kind of an interesting one, but yeah, he's the talk of the town right now, which is interesting to me. I think coming into the season, I knew he was going to be good, but I didn't really expect that. And so it's been nice to hear somebody that right away they're coming in saying, "Oh man, this kid is something special." That was something that I was looking forward to, and I think I was expecting it more from like a Terrius Favors or something, which I think we still will see. But it's nice to see that, you know, he's not one of the only ones coming in making an impact. So speaking of Terrius Favors, we're going to jump right into him. I have some clips here that are filmed by his trainer. He's Julian Colvert, I believe. He's in the chats a lot, and he's a really cool guy. I like to hear his inputs. But he likes to do some behind the scenes footage like this, and some of them are better than the highlights. So I like this one because, yeah, he probably should have caught it right away, but he doesn't give up. You know, he comes down and continues to fight for the ball and ends up making the catch. And that's something that I think.
I mean, that throw though, dude, he's like 4 yards past him.
Yeah.
Like, I want this guy to go have a talk with his quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely had to come back for it. And like I was saying before, he's kind of one of those gadget guys in high school where they would kind of put him at quarterback and stuff and just give him the ball and let him do his thing, you know. And he's fast and he's shifty and he's hard to bring down. I think you see that a lot. I got some good kind of kickoff return ones as well, since they've been talking about having him play at kickoff and punt return this year.
I really like that last clip where he's going up against basically two defenders that I believe it looks like are taller than him, because you're talking about a shorter guy and you take that explosiveness and the speed,
Yeah.
which works really well when you're in high school, but now you're coming into college where the defenders have just as much explosiveness and speed, and it's how can you body up and win those one-on-ones, or in this case one-on-twos. And that's, I think, is where you see the most potential, because he is one of those guys that's not just a quick hand, or sorry, not just quick feet, but if someone can also go up and make a big play one-on-one with that ball control. So yeah, I really like what I see out of him. And I do follow Julian as well and get to see a lot of these other kind of behind the scenes clips. He's going to be one of those guys that I think is just a lot of raw potential. And you know, I think we were talking earlier, might get a chance on like return or something like that. And there is room and availability in that. It's just how much is he going to come in year one and have that same level of competitiveness? I would not be surprised if he's maybe one of those guys that gets a little developed this year. But I do love the raw. I mean, like just like this. I mean, that raw explosive ability that he has.
Yeah, I think the way he runs, you know, he's gonna in the future he's gonna be really impactful after the catch. And I think especially going into college, he might, you know, need to put on a little bit of weight, and he'll be even more impactful.
Yeah. Again, that's the biggest thing with him. And I think it's just like similar to Quentin Brown coming in last
Mhm.
year, right? And just kind of having to build and develop himself a little bit. And we talked ahead of time, and I said that he probably would have gotten a lot more opportunity if he was getting a little bit more of a traditional Boise State offense. But when you don't have a wide receiver room that has a lot of those bigger play, bigger body type wide receivers, to kind of take a little bit of the focus off of some of these quicker guys, you know, like Shane Williams Rhodes type to break
Mhm.
behind, and so you have a little bit more attention on you. I just wonder how well he's going to be able to stand up on his own in that format. But I definitely think that, you know, year two, if not year one and beyond, he is going to be one of those guys that we talk about for sure.
Yeah, and like this, man, it makes me think like he's just so much more athletic than everyone around him that they can just give him the ball and he'll score, you know. And I think that's the case
Yeah.
with a lot of guys in high school, and when they get to college, that's not necessarily as much so. It doesn't mean he can't do the same thing in college, but it is hard to come in the first year and do it, I think.
Right.
Yeah, I think TJ, you know, you talk a lot about coming in with kind of an attacking mentality, and I think he's one of the guys that has that. Every shot I see of him, whether, you know, even the interviews, he's kind of a quiet guy, but he's a confident, quiet guy. You know, he knows what he's capable of. And when you see him on the field, I mean, it's like right here when he's running right into a pack of guys, he doesn't slow down. There's no question in his mind that he's going to run right through them, you know? So I like that about him. I think he definitely brings that attacker mentality you talk about a lot.
Yeah,
I
for sure.
agree. I think that mentality is 100% there. When I got to talk to him a little bit earlier this year on the channel, he is one of those guys who's not like bragging himself up, but if you can lock in to talking about something he's good at, you kind of see that fire and that spark. You know, I was talking earlier before you came on, TJ was asking him what he sees himself as, like a player that he tries to emulate, and he was talking about being Travis Hunter being one of those guys for him. And so that confidence to say something like that, while also it didn't come off like he was bragging or trying to put himself, beyond what he was or should be. I like
Mm.
that. So I do like a lot of what I see out of him. I think that it may just be kind of a circumstantial, the room where it's at right now.
Yeah.
But I think that he will be a guy that explodes certainly in the future for us.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like we have so many good receivers coming in, both from JV and other guys that have a little more college experience already, and guys returning like Ben Ford and Cam Bates and stuff that we can't forget about. But I think he, I don't think he's not capable of coming in and making an impact this year. But I do think he's one of those guys that if we do redshirt him and give him just a few games of experience, let him grow in body size, that buys us an extra year of performance from him. And he comes in his first year just killing, he comes in with that much more potential, that much more mindset, that much more knowledge of the plays and all of that. And when he does come in for that second year, his redshirt freshman year, I mean, he would be, I think, just pretty explosive. So it might be worth redshirting him, even though I don't necessarily think he needs it. But it's one of those things. I think redshirting almost never hurts a guy. I think it's always good to come in more developed and more ready.
Redshirt
Also,
doesn't mean the same thing that it used to. I mean, you can play
I
almost the
know.
whole season. It's still redshirt.
Yeah.
So
It's like, when did this happen, man? It's like this whole thing is like flipped, right? Like before, it was like, man, you cannot even smell the field and expect to redshirt. You
yeah.
cannot even smell a Big Mac for free without, like, you know what I mean? Like a whip. And I was like, hey, man, unlimited.
Yeah, one extreme to the other. My goodness.
But I mean, that's a conversation for another time. But it is very interesting. I feel like it's good. The like you said, one extreme to the other, that's never good in just anything in general. But
Mhm.
I do think that there's definitely an opportunity for our country and our sports and business to kind of level the playing field in some way and help guys find their best fit. As far as, I mean, because, right, you want to find your best fit as a position. You also want to find your best fit as on a team, right,
Mhm.
and with coaches and in a community. And I think that there's so much good that can be done from, a player that either got too much attention and went to somewhere because it seemed big and great,
Mm.
or a guy who didn't get enough attention but would really, be the difference maker, the game changer for a city.
Mhm.
And I think that with some of these rule changes that we are seeing, I think that's a fortunate consequence, is that people
Mm.
can find their way to their most valuable place faster. I just think that right now, with no limits on it, it's just like, okay, we got to go through this kind of growing pain, but whatever, we'll
Yeah.
Yeah.
we'll just endure it.
Yeah, I think that's a good take that I think you don't hear very often in today's climate because everybody's so caught up with the change. Change is always bad in a lot of people's mind, and it's nice to hear that side of it as well. I think.
We're all
Um,
we're all Luddites at heart. We never want to see the change, but if we can just get past it, we'll be in the industrial age. We'll be fine.
Yeah.
so those were most of the wide receivers I really wanted to review. I think those are some of the new guys, the new recruits, and the new transfers that can come in and make an impact pretty quickly for us.
Well, let me
Um,
ask you, Emran,
mhm.
of those guys that you saw, and you've seen a lot of tape, and that's what I really love about your guys' channel is that you really do dive into that tape. So, all of last year, reviewing all the games compared to some of this film, who's one of those guys? You talked about potential of each of them, but one of those players that we just looked at that you would say, I would take him and insert him into the offense day one. Like, I think that he could perform at the same level or higher than who we've got right now. Who's one of those players for you that we just watched?
I mean, the thing is like his tape is good. To me, it doesn't stand out. Like Akeem Wrights, to me, when I watch the tape, I'm like, dang, dude, this guy could be a star, right? But
Hmm.
from what I'm hearing in camp, man, it's Rashawn Jones. And I think everybody at camp has said that. Every interview of a
Sure.
player, every interview of a coach, and his tape is good. It's really good. But to hear what he's doing in camp, I think he's
Mm.
coming in, and Akeem Wright is maybe having a little bit of growing pains, figuring out the playbook and adapting to the faster pace of the FBS. And it sounds like Rashawn Jones is not having those growing pains. So I think Rashawn Jones is probably going to be the guy that can come in and even as a freshman make a pretty big impact. And honestly, we need a big receiver. We need a tall guy with a lot of weight that can be physical, can make those 50-50 catches, can make the moves after the catch. And he's got a little bit of all of that, But we have so many short, fast guys. I think it would help us a lot to have a big physical guy. So I think
it'd be pretty cool to see 2 Idaho guys leading the way there.
Oh, yeah.
Between him and Ben Ford, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, and I still think Ben Ford's going to be one of the standout guys this year again. Yeah, like I said, I was heartbroken when he went down last year.
Sure.
And I think this year he's going to do the same thing we saw last year, but probably come back with an even more fierce mindset because he's like, I was doing good. I didn't get my chance. This year I'm going to take full advantage,
No, I do want to shout out Ben Ford though, man. Been very impressed. I mean, because he was like a running quarterback in high school, right? Over there at Eagle.
Yeah.
And so to just there's something about a guy who is just like, what do you need me to do? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and I'm gonna do it well, and I'm gonna do it you know what I mean, consistently and dependably. And so I'm a huge fan of Ben Ford after seeing what he did last year.
And I like that he is a guy who stays after it, and that kind of never quit mentality.
Yeah.
I mean, we both kind of remember the first game we all kind of remember the first game of last year. And I think that they definitely talked about that and handled it. But again, sometimes that type of consequence happens, months before the game is played, right? And then you got to kind of be reactive about it. So, some of these things that I'm seeing, the effort, the grit, the not going down easy, the hitting hard, the not giving up, it's all encouraging stuff, and now it's back onto the coaches to, like you were saying, just take some history from the past and really figure out, like, man, what is that combination to get the best guys here and to stay? And I mean, it's just, there are so many more levels above it that people aren't even really thinking about, as far as team cohesion goes, as far as community involvement goes, as far as purposeful NIL, really starting with the fans. I mean, because it's like, it's kind of like with government, right? It's like the people, the constituency, that's who really makes the decisions. And as fans, I think that we got to cheer loud when they're doing it right. And we got to, just not cheer so loud, but maybe not, maybe not question too much, but also, it's like,
I really love that, especially talking about the role of the fans, because I think if the team isn't performing to the level and that standard of Boise State, it's really the fan base that carries that standard, that memory, right? Your players and coaches come and go, but fans are the ones that have been watching since they were kids. They're the ones who have gone through every generation of Boise State up until this point. And the moment that a fan base stops holding their team to that level of expectation, the moment that apathy enters a fan base, that's when teams die. And so if Boise State's going to continue to be elite and find ways to become that leader again in the college football world, the fan base has to step up and in a respectful way say when the standard isn't being met so that Boise State can return to that. And so I think it's a give and take, and it's hard to describe exactly what that looks like. We know what wrong looks like. We know when vitriol is present, or the overall that's just too positive where you can't even get a word in for things that need to change. But we do need as a fan base to find that middle ground, and I really like your thoughts on that, what you were saying.
Yeah, thanks, Beck. Got you. Yeah, no, really respect what you're doing, man. And it's been a pleasure to be on with you guys. Amron, thank you for putting this together, man. I hope that we can continue to do this like during the season and whatnot. I think there's a lot of good to come out of it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, TJ. It was nice having you.
Blast having you on, man. It was great.
All right, you guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
See you, man.
Yeah, and I will say, like, it's just like we were talking about Coach Pete. You could have the best game of your career, and you go back psyched, and Coach Pete is like, hey, here's all the shit you did wrong. And, it's not that he doesn't know that you're improving and that you're doing well. It's just that he sees you could be better. And I want you to be better. I want you to be the best version of yourself that you can be. And that's coming out of a place of love. And I think as a fan, that's where we're coming from. People like me and you sometimes can criticize the team, but we're not criticizing them out of the vitriol. We're criticizing them out of love. We want this team to be the best they can be. And I think the coaches do it too. They congratulate them when they do a good job, but they also are saying, but you could do this a little bit better. And I think as fans, there's nothing wrong with us doing what the coaches and the players are doing, you know?
Right. If you didn't care, you wouldn't say anything, right? That's what
Yep.
fandom is. That's what passion is. And that needs to be encouraged. And I would rather, now there's again extremes, but I would rather the fan base express their disappointment, even if they go too far sometimes, than not express anything at all. Because again, the moment that happens, it means that the standard has been potentially forever lost. I mean, once you lose something like that, you lose that passion and that buy-in, it is really, really hard to get it back. So hopefully this next year, these new players coming in, opportunity, new blood, new vibrance to be able to really find that old energy at Boise State. And I think one position group we haven't talked about, if you're okay going to it, is the secondary, because I think that is one of those areas where we lose a lot of experience, a lot of leadership, but some of these guys coming in are really, really, really exciting. We talk about the energy from the wide receiver coach, some of the energy from the corner coach, which you were talking about as well, coming in. Some of the things he's saying and the passion that he's showing is starting to give me those old day feels and vibes. And when you look at those Boise State teams of the past, when you look at those teams that had that high perfection, that high drive, a lot of times that came from the defense. You know, Boise State, the Kellen Moores and the Doug Martins, right? They pop off the page, the Titus Youngs and whatnot come to our mind, but it really was the defenses that built Boise State to the level where they became a program that could be anyone and everybody, because their defenses stood up to the best of them and they brought an energy that inspired the whole team. A huge hit in the secondary, coming down from a George Iloka or a Kyle Wilson type, you know, a huge turnover forced by like a Chase Baker type or something like that, you know, or Ricky Chongachu. That is what inspired the offense and brought that level of passion in practice as well as on the field. So
Mhm.
if you don't mind, if we could move to talking about the secondary, because I think when we talk about areas that have the most potential, but we just don't know where it's going to go, excitement, but also wariness of the future, the secondary for me is one of those areas that I'm really excited and nervous about coming into this year.
Yeah, and I agree. I think looking back on my time as a fan back in the day watching the Kellen era, you know, the way that the defense just they had that killer mentality, it separated us from the big boys. You look at us against Georgia and Oklahoma and all of them, even in those games where we're playing the biggest of, the biggest and the best, there was something different about how we looked in that mentality and in that effort. And I think that's when Boise State, coaches, players, everybody talks about blue blood, blue collar. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about that type of killer mentality, that type of effort, that thing, that special something that just separated us from everyone else. And when you go back and watch that old footage, it's there. And last year, it wasn't really there. It was not quite as much as what we've seen in the past. And I think there has been a little bit of a slippery slope on that. And I agree with you. I think we need to get back to it. I think with this position group this year, we definitely lost a lot of big boys. We lost Benefield. We lost McCoy. A lot of the kind of core of the secondary. But this year, I'm a little bit optimistic, and I'm also a little bit hesitant. I think Mickey is going to step up and be a leader, and he's going to be able to do his thing. I think we're going to see a little bit of a breakout year from Mickey. He was already doing very well last year. I remember the first game where he came in, and he kind of only got, I think, 1 or 2 plays, and then they pulled him back out again, right? But when he had those couple plays, it was like he was in the right spot. He was making hard tackles. He stripped the ball. Like, he had that mentality and he had that effort that we like to see as Boise State. And I think this year he's going to help to lead the group with that. So I expect to see him do good things. We have Roman Tillman, I think, is going to come in and he's going to elevate and be able to do his thing. He's not going to be a Ty Benefield, I don't think. He could be, but I think he's not quite going to be there yet. Jericho Washington, I saw some good things out of him. I was watching a lot of his film And I was trying to get some good clips of them. A lot of those guys are hard because they're coming from FCS and FBS, so it's harder to get clips that we can get away with showing, right? But Jericho Washington, when I was watching his film, he didn't have a lot of plays where he's like intercepting and making huge one-on-one breakups and stuff, but he was always in the right spot. He usually had that full effort. He was just kind of a guy that was always doing his job, you know. And I think we definitely need guys like that. So I don't know if he's going to be one of the like main starters or anything like that, but you know, he's a guy that has the potential. And he's coming from a college experience, has a little bit more of that, you know, caught up to the speed and physicality and all of that. So Cam Jamerson coming from TCU, same thing, man. He didn't really play for TCU, so you don't have much film there. But I went back and looked at his high school stuff, and same kind of a deal. There was a lot of plays where he's just stuffing the guy up so he can't do anything, and he's just in the right spots. He's doing what he needs to do to shut his guy down, even though it's not a flashy pass breakup. It's a stuff him at the line so his guy can't do anything, you know? And that's not quite as flashy, but it helps. And so he's another guy that I think stood out to me on the off season when he was announced.
I am a little worried because it feels like that transition from 2022 to 2023. I mean, we're losing that level of production, right? You know, 2022, 2023, that's when you lost J.L. Skinner and Tyreek Jones and LaBeouf and Biggers and everybody else. And coming to this year, we lost, you didn't mention him earlier, but Irby as well. I mean, so Boise State lost everybody. They lost their 2 starting corners, lost their 2 starting safeties, and then starting the year at nickel, obviously ending up not being as big a contributor due to some off-field stuff with Banks. But I mean, you lose basically your entire secondary to transfer, graduation, or whatnot. So yes, this is a unit that on paper, I'm massively concerned because we don't have that proven production. We don't have, and not just that, we don't have a true necessarily established leader. Now, I do think that Mickey, it can be that. And I think that what he did last year, but he's also a guy that only just started playing for Boise State last year, coming from Notre Dame. So it's not like it's a guy that's been in the program and in the culture for 3 or 4 years, and now he's the guy stepping up to be that leader, like Benefield was after Tubner, right? That's not the same situation. And so I do think that that's going to be the biggest thing is who steps up to be that leader, not just for the defense, but specifically who steps up in the locker room to be that leader for the secondary. I think it will be Mickey, but that does leave me a little bit concerned. Like Tubner, he wasn't the most incredible NFL level athlete, but he was a general on the field and in the locker room, and his presence, as we saw when he got injured, made a huge difference because of the ability that he gave that defense to work as a cohesive unit. So regardless of fitting new players in, who steps up as that center mold, that's my biggest concern. But then when you start moving to look at pure talent level, that's when I start to get a little bit excited because some of these guys really start to pop, similar to what I saw, like you said, looking back at those olden days of Boise State, that energy and that aggression. Already talked about Mickey. Can't say enough good things about him. Got injured a little bit way through the season, came back in, played really, really well. Who I like, who has been the talk of the town, really starting back last year. I wasn't like some kind of miraculous prophet that I foresaw this. I mean, everybody saw what he was able to do. Sherrod Smith. I love watching Sherrod Smith, a guy who only had 24 tackles last year, but almost all those came in the last 3 games when he finally got his opportunity. And when he stepped on the field, there were some plays out there where he looked like Kyle Wilson, you know, where he was going after guys, where he was staying with the play even after the ball is caught and ripping those arms away to get that incompletion in the end. And so I'm really excited about him. I'm really excited about Jaden Mickey. I'm excited about the potential of Derek Ganner Jr. and some of these transfers that are coming in, like we talked about already with Tillman and even something we haven't really mentioned too much specifically, but Powell coming in from Notre Dame, former teammate of Mickey, is excited about that. But for me, the 2 guys after that that stand out to me the most is I really like Jericho Washington, guy coming from Kent State, so not just FCS or JUCO, been playing at, I mean, as much as Conference USA is FBS level, technically it is. So playing in Conference USA, he's one of those guys, you mentioned someone who's just kind of in the right place all over the field, had a bunch of tackles his last year there, 52, kind of like a Kaniho the Elder, not number 14, but Kaniho the Elder, kind of how he was just always in that right position. Wasn't necessarily the biggest play type of player, but he was always where he needed to be. I like that out of him. And then the last guy I'm going to throw out, there's some other guys we could talk about, but the last guy I'm going to throw out that I'm really excited about is Arthur Debuachi. Another guy from the Netherlands, just like, just like Ricky Chongachu, just like Geraldo Boldewijn. He has some really exciting tape playing over in the UK. So he came out of the NFL UK pipeline, first in his family to come play American football. So he's very much a raw energy, kind of like a Max Deej type, very raw energy, trying to develop. Actually played for Chase Baker over there, who's over working with the NFL UK. But he came in last year developing himself. This year, now that he's had an opportunity to learn the American game in America and actually develop this playbook, he's a guy who really stood out. When I talked to Tubner last year, and I said, is there anybody that you've seen in practice or coming in that you're excited about? The number one guy, he also mentioned Cole Miller, but the number one guy that he talked about was Arthur Debuachi. So I am excited about him. I think he could have a breakout year this season. I think we have all the pieces we need. We just have to have that one or two guys step up to the lead, and then it will all work out. So I'm excited, man. I'm a little apprehensive, but I'm very excited.
Yeah, and I agree with a lot of those points. I think Debuachi, is that how you say it? Debuachi, man. One of those guys where it's like, I've heard about him, but I just haven't had a chance to see him,
Yeah, he only had one tackle last year.
So the thing that kind of made me hesitant on him is, why were they starting Freeney and Sherrod? I mean, we know why they were starting Sherrod Smith, right? I'm as big on him as you are. I love Sherrod. Last year, towards the end of the year, he was like my cornerback. I was like, dude, that's the guy. But like, they were starting Freeney over Debuachi, and it's like, that makes me a little bit like, was he needing to get the experience in the American football and the play calling and all of that, catching up on that side? Or was there something else there too that made them start Freeney over them? This year, in camp, I've heard more talk about Freeney than I have about Debuachi. So that makes me a little bit hesitant too. Why is that, But I agree with you. I've heard a lot about him. And I think he could be one of those guys. He just needs to be.
I think it's, those guys that come from that pipeline. Sanusi was also the same pipeline. Sanusi and Lopez Sanusi, and then Max Deej and Debuachi. These guys obviously recruited. Boise State's done a great job of going out into the European sphere and all over the world and bringing in these playmakers, whether that be from Canada, the Netherlands, or Germany, or wherever. But talking with these guys, and they'll mention, I mean, I got to interview Max Deej last year. He said, it is a big deal transitioning from that kind of hobby level of football to the collegiate level. I mean, it's a huge jump, and it takes a while to get that under your belt and get that mentality. Combine that with the fact that you have a transition in your coaching staff as well. And also last year wasn't necessarily the best environment for that corner room, that secondary room, I don't think. I think that there are some factors there that have played potentially in keeping him from reaching his max potential. But I think that given the opportunity that he had last year to get on the field and experience those live, as we come through spring camp into fall camp, I think he's going to be one of those guys that we start to, that locks in, that we start to see that playbook develop for him, especially with so much opportunity that there is. I guess we'll all come down to what we see in the spring game for what we can project in the future. But based on what I've heard, based on what I've seen, based on talking to him, he just seems like one of those guys that has the right mentality and has that skill set if he can be developed properly.
Yeah, I could see that. And, speaking of coaches a little bit there, I'm really excited for this new coach. I think it's a good move for our team right now to put all of the cornerbacks and safeties in one DB room. I think last year there was a little bit of disconnect at times. Some of the big plays where people, fans were upset, like, how was that guy not covered? It's because there was a miscommunication between the safety and the cornerback on who's got who, who's transferring from their guy over to that guy. And I think that disconnect was a big problem last year. And I think having them all in one room and keeping that communication closer, more connected is going to be key. So I like that move. And I think this DB coach, he's got a little bit something special for me. The last guy just never impressed me. And even this last year when he started doing better, the whole position group started elevating towards the end of the year. It's still very coincidental to me that happened the exact game that Shenander transferred to the sideline. And even Shenander, in an interview shortly after that, talked about how much of a difference it made to be down there and be in the be in the trenches with the guys and how much of an impact it made so that he could communicate with those guys in the moment instead of being up in the booth. So the fact that the transition and the elevation of that group came at that exact game and was good from then on is coincidental to me. Let's just say it that way. And for like years before that, they had been a little lackluster. You know what I mean? So was it the position coach elevating, or was it the Shenander change? I'm still a little bit torn on that. So I'm not sold that the position group coach suddenly got better after 3 years or whatever. You know what I mean? And I am curious to see when this guy comes in. I love the energy. I love the experience. I love his mindset. He definitely has a killer mentality. And I think he's going to bring a little bit more of that into the position. And I'm excited to see that.
I think that, yes, maybe Chenander being down there had an impact, but I think more than anything, it was a kind of a do or die moment. I think he sensed that his position in the coaching staff was very much at question, and that hot seat got raging hot. And sometimes that's the pressure you need to unlock that next level. And maybe you start just throwing things at the wall to find what sticks, and maybe he found something. I don't know exactly what the reason was for why Boise State improved so dramatically on that back end of the year, but what I can say for certainty is that that position group was in a fight for survival pretty much the whole year. They weren't just looking, how can we develop the second and third string? They were saying, how can we fix this first unit? How can we get to a place where we're no longer a liability? And they found it at the end. But again, in that survival, we talk about Tawachi, why maybe he didn't develop. When you're in that survival mindset and you are focused on simply just trying to make the system work, you don't have the time and the luxury to develop the guys coming in from behind. And so now, new position coach coming in, energy, passion, love to see it. Some playmaker stepping up. He's still got to find his starting group, but maybe now there's that opportunity for the development that couldn't take place last year because of the circumstances to take place now. But that's my perspective on it. I love your thoughts as well, what you were saying, with just kind of looking at what may have impacted that change. I think it's very interesting. It could have been, regardless, though, it doesn't change the fact that that group was in survival mode the whole year round, and I think that played a major factor.
Yeah, for sure. And, talking about development, I think that's bigger than that position group. I think last year we kind of saw that throughout. And I think the spot for me that really pointed it out was the quarterbacks, of course. We had a couple videos on this when the changes were happening. When Madsen went down and Cutforth came in, wasn't doing so good. And then he started doing well. One of the things that really stood out to me on that is like when he first came in, he just had no pocket awareness. And that might be brutal to say, but like when he started getting pressured, all of his attention went to those guys pressuring the pocket and trying to escape. And he looked a little frazzled in the moment. But then we, fast forward about 2 games, and all of a sudden he's rolling out away from that pressure and still looking downfield and making good throws. And it's like that frazzle and that loss of attention to downfield and all of that went away very quickly. And I know that game reps are, very important in developing that. But at the same time, it did make me wonder, like, okay, all year long, we knew Madsen was the guy, but we knew he was our only guy. And even from the beginning, everyone was talking about if he goes down, we're in trouble. It makes me wonder, why were the position coaches not like on the backup? Like, we need to develop this guy because if something happens, we're screwed. And the fact that he developed so quickly shortly after he got in it shows me he had the potential. It's just he wasn't getting that development. He didn't get the starter type focus on development until he was the starter. And I think I don't think it's just quarterbacks, and I don't think it's just cornerbacks. I think this is something that we've seen a little bit throughout the whole team. They tend to put this focus on the starters, which rightfully so. We need to make sure the starters are ready, but we also need to be building that depth. What happens when those starters leave, like we're seeing right now? Do we have the guys ready to step up, ready to take over, or are they searching for the guys, right? So, and I feel like in the past, when we were in Coach Pete era and stuff, when somebody left, all of a sudden the next year, new standout all of a sudden. Like, where did this guy come from? But the coaches kind of knew he was the guy, like they knew he had it. And I just don't feel like that's necessarily the case anymore. So that was something I noticed last year with the whole quarterback situation, and I think it touches a little bit on what we're seeing with the defensive backs right now.
Yeah, I would agree. It was my biggest complaint last year when I was talking about not just this is not just a problem with performance, it's a problem with mindset and mentality because it almost feels or almost felt like the coaches were so worried to put pressure on Madsen that they didn't develop someone who could put pressure on him. And again, I think part of that is a response, it's a reactive response to the vitriol in the fan base because so many people are anti Madsen. So there almost is this internal shift, like we have to come around our guy and we have to protect him from that outside noise and let him know how important he is to us. And there is value to a certain extent in that. But at the end of the day, when we talk about the reason that all of those guys in the past were able to step up at that next level is that they were in camp, they were in practice competing with each other. Nobody's
Yeah.
job was safe.
Yep.
Players were getting bad plays, and the next down, it's a new player out there. That's what the mentality used to be. You would not have ever seen in even the Harsin days a UCF situation where Banks has back-to-back plays on the same drive where he stays in the game after that. And again, later on in the season, Spencer Danielson made the changes and things started to happen. But I don't know. I think that it's a situation of somebody. I think they were talking about this on one of the Bronco Nation news podcasts. I forget where this thought came from, but there was something about these playmakers, these players and coaches. They go through such a traumatic experience with the whole Andy Avalos situation, and that trauma, that bonding that came out of it, it created this very strong family mindset within the team. Right, this very strong family mindset within the team, which is good. It's good to have the family mindset, but it almost created a shift in priority from performing on the field to winning on the field to the relationship in the locker room. And so it's good to have both. You don't want to have a coach who's just an a-hole that you can't get along with and he only cares about winning, but you also can't have a coach who's just purely relational. You have to find that in between, just like TJ was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And so it feels like as we're moving along throughout Spencer Danielson's tenure as head coach, that he's starting to shift and find that. But it
Yeah.
definitely, I think, one of those weaknesses within the program when you're talking about guys not necessarily being developed as starters because they're not, because it's clear you're not going to start until this guy's gone, is because of that over focus on relationship. And so we'll see. Spencer Danielson's a young coach. There's a lot of opportunity to grow here. I'm not on a fire Spencer Danielson wagon or anything like that, but I definitely say that he needs to grow and change and develop his mindset and his personality, or at least bring in people like a Cutter
Hmm.
who do have that focus on we need to win and here's the standard to get there to win, that he can allow to run their systems, and then he kind of is the good cop balance out. And I just don't know if last year we had that balance between him being the relational side and then a coach who was at a level at or above his experience, because we had a brand new offensive coordinator who could counter him and be that presence on the field of, hey, this guy's sitting because he's not meeting our standard and we're going to work on him with that. It felt like there was a disconnect.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we are starting to see that, which I really like. It's interesting that you bring up the Andy Avalos and kind of the mentality coming out of that, because I'd never really thought about this before. But okay, you come out of that Andy Avalos, you have this family mentality, everybody's doing it for their brother, and we have Ashton Genty to lead that charge. Then that year ends and we lose that heart, right? Of the family group, if you will. But we also lose guys like Tubner, who was the heart of the defense. We lose a lot of the family leaders, and half of that family that in this family mentality team is now gone. And there's this
Right.
vacuum of energy, right? Like there's still this family
Yeah.
mentality, but half the family's not there. And it's just kind of like, what are we doing? Like, where do we go from here? And I think we sensed that last year. And so, yeah, I think that's a good point that I never really thought about in that way. And I think as far as Madsen, man, like he strives on being pushed. We saw that his
Yes, he
first
does.
years. You know, when he had the big quarterback that he had to beat out, he rose to that occasion and he did
Yeah.
it, you know. And last year he didn't have to do that, and I think he got a little bit comfortable. He didn't have to elevate his game. He had to be the best version of himself, but there was nothing pushing him to be better than that, you know.
Yeah.
And I think I'm one of those guys, so I can relate with that. I'm one of those guys where it's like, if I'm pushed and I have
Mm.
something that's a little bit scary that you have to rise to that occasion, I'm going to do it. I'm going to step up. And I think he has a little
Right.
bit of that in him too. I think that little bit of a push really helps to elevate his game. And this year, I know everybody thinks he's the starter quarterback. And I know we touched on this a little bit earlier, but I do think even if the coaches know he's our guy, they should not be saying that. I think they
Right.
should be saying, if he's our guy, let him show us.
Yes.
And
Yep.
they could be thinking, we know he's the guy, but playing that game is what's going to get the best out of him. And I think part of being a good
Yeah.
coach, or like I was a general manager for a long time, same kind of a thing. You have to read your employees. You have to know how they respond. And the coaches say the same thing. You have to know what guys you have to say, hey, that was terrible. You suck. And to get them to be like, I'm going to show you that you're wrong and step up.
Right.
And some guys, if you do that, will shut down. Some
Right.
guys you have to be like, hey, I know you can do better. Here's how we can do that. You have to be more supportive. You have to figure out which
Yeah.
guys are which. And I think Madsen's one of those guys where it's just like, you got to put him in the fire just a little bit, and he steps up. He rises to that occasion.
He's
So,
Mad Dog. He's a fighter.
Yeah.
He needs something to protect his territory. He needs someone to push him where he gets to prove that he's better than you thought about him. His best games of the season come after his worst performances.
Yeah.
After he's had a bad game and the fans are just ripping on him, and I'm not saying this to encourage fans to do that. I'm just saying this is coincidental, but after his bad games and the fans are ripping on him, he then comes out and it's like I'm going to show you mentality, and he just dominates and has these incredible performances because he is that fighter. And that's what I love the most about Max Madsen, is that he is that classic chip on your shoulder. Nobody else wanted me. I'm going to prove that I'm better than all of everyone else who said I couldn't do it type of guys. That blue collar mentality, that's who Max Madsen is. But he needs someone behind him who is yipping at his heels that he's got to fight off and be that player. And I think it is the worst, absolute worst mindset to get with a player like that and say, he's our guy, rain or shine. He's our guy, even when he's hurt and can barely walk on the field.
Yeah.
He's our guy, because that does build that complacency for any human being. And then certain personality types, it's a bigger factor.
And one thing that I will say about this coaching staff and about Spencer Danielson is, going into this year, we've seen a big change in how they're running spring camp. We're starting to see them doing split groups, which I guess they weren't doing as much before, where, the backups maybe used to get a handful of reps per day because they were focused on trying to get reps for the starters. And now with these split groups, I think all the backups are getting way more snaps than we saw in the past. And going back to having those backups in development and ready to take over when the guys leave, I think that plays a big, big part of it. When the backups are only getting a handful of snaps every day, they're going to progress slower. When they're getting 15, 16 plus every day, then they're going to progress faster. That's just math, So
Yeah.
I think the more of that we can do, the better. And I also like hearing that they're doing some live tackling. I know it's a risk of getting hurt, but this is football. Like, that's a risk. And the only way you can get good at playing football is playing football, So I mean, I was just watching an Oregon video the other day talking about their linebackers and scouting the enemy, if you will. And the interesting things I see is they're saying, hey, we're going to be tackling today. We want you to be aggressive. That's why we have pads on. The pads are here to protect us when we're aggressive. And so, we got to be cautiously aggressive at times, not do something stupid just for the sake of doing it and risk getting hurt. But we can't also be pulling back all of our tackles and never getting those reps. We got to be aggressive and build that into the mentality. And I think, they're the first team we play this year, and they're thinking that way. We need to be thinking that way too. So it makes me happy to see that they're tackling a little bit better, tackling more, I should say, and hopefully tackling better because of that. But I think those different changes in how they're leading the spring camp are going to pay dividends. And I think we're going to see that coming out of it. And I think a lot of people maybe are going to come out as going into the first games. Maybe Oregon might be a little shaky because it's Oregon. They're a pretty damn good team. But but I think we're going to see a little bit from this team where people are like, man, where was this last year? a little bit of that personality and the killer instinct. And I think these changes at camp are a big part of what's going to help drive that.
Yeah, I love that. I believe it was Jerron Johnson who said, when when I got an opportunity to talk to him, that like in camp, in practice, they hated each other, right? The offense, the defense. When you lined up against them in that moment, they were the enemy, and you
Yeah.
had to beat them. And I love that it feels like Boise State's trying to encourage that mindset. It feels like a little more like going to contact a little bit earlier than they have in the past and trying to do those split groups with more reps and opportunities. And so hopefully Boise State can get back to that killer instinct. Here towards the end of the video, what are your final thoughts on just where this team is at, what you expect to see out of spring camp, and then what position you specifically are expecting to see the most out of in the spring game?
Man, from what I expect to see, I think we've gone over it. I expect to see a little bit more of that killer mentality. I expect to see the young guys stepping up. We need that to happen. If we don't have guys step up this year, we're not going to be good. We're just not going to survive. And so I like the way that they're approaching it. Talking about the competition mentality of the offense versus defense. I heard a story of like the DB's coach. One of the guys shut down the wide receiver, and the DB coach is over there strutting his stuff, showing off and like taunting the offense. And it's like, that's what we need, man. That's the mentality we like to see. And that I think the coaches having a little bit of that drives it into the players, Yeah, we're all brothers, but we're also, we have a competition here. And so I like to see that. And I think we're going to need a lot of that going into this year. What I want to see is I want to see the offensive line step up. A lot of people aren't as worried about the offensive line as I think I am. All of the guys that are returning did not impress me last year. And when we watch like Ashton Genty era, like there was different play calls. And I think you're right that goes into it a little bit, but we saw gaps for him to run through. And yes, he was breaking tackles and getting extra yards and breaking the big things on his own in a sense at times. But there was always a first gap that he would make it through and then break the tackle and bounce to the outside. This year, when I watched the running backs, there were just not gaps for them to go through, hardly ever. A few times there were, but a lot of times it was like they were running into a wall. And if a gap did open up beside them, let's say their gap was kind of right off the guard and there was a gap off to the outside, they wouldn't bounce to that. They would try to force the gap they were meant to go through. And I think we need to.
So a lot of that early in the year from Leak Sherrod, especially. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even Dylan Riley and Sire Gaines, I saw it. I think there were flashes where we started to see that less, but I saw a lot of running into backs, and just gaps not quite as big as they need to be. If you watch some of our footage reviews, there were some where a lineman and offensive lineman would create the gap, move upfield, and then completely run past a guy, and then that guy would get the tackle. And it's like, it's good that we're moving upfield and trying to get that second level, but we need to be stopping the guys that's about to tackle him first, So there's different things like that I think the offensive line just needs to step up on. We need less fouls as well. That just can't be happening like we saw last year. So I'm a little worried about the offensive line. They need to step up. And I think coming out of spring camp, we're going to see a lot of wide receivers because we just have a good group. And I think people like the offensive line might be finding their leggings a little bit. The defensive backs is a new group, new coach, might be finding their legs a little bit. Maybe not. Maybe they'll come out and impress. But I think the wide receivers, they're going to come out a little flashy and be like, look what we got, and throw some big passes and show off Rashawn Jones and some of these guys that they've been pretty happy with. So spring game, I expect a lot of that. Going into the season, we will probably see a little bit more going back to the run. I don't know. That's kind of my overall gist of this year.
Yeah, I think we've talked about all of my concerns and where Boise State may go this year. I think as far as the spring game goes, it's always hard to evaluate your own offense versus your own defense. Is your offense making really good plays because they're good, or are they making really good plays because your secondary sucks?
Yep.
I think it was telling last spring game that we didn't see a lot of the explosive. There were a couple of plays here and there, and we saw that, that one play to Chase Penry, right, where it's like deep and he kind of like undercut the corner in the end zone. But I think that we didn't see a lot of the explosive wide receiver ability, and that translated into the season. And so whether it's because of a bad corner play or not, what I would in the ideal world, what I'd love to see is super tight coverage and our guys making highlight reel like we saw earlier in this video, one-handed grabs
50-50
over
catches,
players
yeah.
and 50-50 impossible catch situation, they make the play. That's what I would love to see. But I would be happy with any form of explosiveness out of our wide receiver core, even if it means the guy is wide open downfield, but you hit him on a, Quentin Brown down the sideline versus Utah State kind of play. I'd be excited by any of that. But beyond that, what I'm really looking to see is I'd like to see Max Matson stepping up and playing well, but I really want to see these other guys playing at a level of confidence in the quick release and how they're reading, not just going to that first read, but reading the defense as a whole from our backups, because that will give me some mindset that Matson is being pushed a little, even if he's the guaranteed starter, that he is being pushed a little, and we have a potential that we can fall back on. Because even going back to the last spring game, Matson had some nice plays. Once he left, we really didn't see a lot of explosive plays out of the quarterback position, a lot of handing
Yeah.
off the ball and a lot of incompletions and that kind of thing. I think it was Max Cupforth who threw that deep pass to Chase Penry, but there just wasn't a lot of that, and I think it showed. And so I think you can tell where some of the mindset of the team is coming into a spring game, and so that's what I'm looking to see out of the offense. And then the only thing that I want to see out of the defense is clean tackling. I would love to see
Yeah.
everything else, but the one thing that I want to see, the one thing that drove me the craziest last year, and it
Yeah.
wasn't even just the penalties, it was the worst tackling for a season from beginning to end that I have ever seen as a Boise State fan. Not even during the COVID years was it this bad. And so just some clean tackling. If our running backs, if Dylan Riley, Sire Gaines, they're able to break a tackle, that'd be great. But I don't want to see arm tackles, guys just being laid out by a stiff arm,
Yep.
players going for going for the face mask because they missed and now they're desperate. I want to see some clean wrap up, going for the hip down to the leg tackling that we just did not see last year. So that's the things I want to see. As far as where Boise State's going to go this year, I don't know. I'll feel a lot more confident or less confident after the spring game, but and because the position groups that we just don't know, the secondary wide receivers specifically, they will show us something in the spring game that we can then build a foundation for going into next year. And that will all be covered in my preseason previews for the Boise State 2026 season. Going to have former players coming on offense, defense, special teams. So get up for that and keep an eye out for those. It's been great having you on or having me on, whichever way you see it, and getting to talk to you about this stuff, man. I love your content. Everybody, make sure that you go out and check out the content that is on the Bronco Blueprint. Fantastic stuff. And again, I'll put a link to it in my description. Thanks so much for having me on, man. This has been great.
Yeah. Once again, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate you coming on. I love your content as well. So thanks again for doing this, and hopefully we can do it again more throughout the year.
Absolutely, dude. Loved the content. Loved talking about it. Loved getting an opportunity to talk with TJ as well. This is fantastic. Thanks so much for having me on. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. And as always, go big blue.
Go Broncos.